Hi. Thank you, Angie, and hello to everyone. As I go through this, if anybody has any questions, feel free to stop me to ask them, and we'll have time at the end too if you have questions, but feel free to stop me at any time. Um, so today I'm going to focus mainly on um, what my division in CLA can offer for non-for-profits, but I'll touch a little bit too on beyond my part of CLA, what can be offered for non-for-profits. As Angie said, I'm part of the BizOps division for CLA, and that is really focusing on outsourced accounting. So whether you need a staff accountant, a controller level, CFO level, and we'll get into more detail what all that means. But first I wanted to point out CLA is a nationwide firm, but we, as you can see from this slide, we service a lot of non-for-profit organizations. So even though I'm out of the Champaign office and focus on non-for-profit, if there's ever a question or issue that I don't know, there are plenty of resources I can go to within CLA to get those answers, or even to get some ideas on how to approach a situation or issue. So this slide shows, starting on the left-hand side, what we can do at a minimum as part of the BizOps division to everything else CLA could offer based on your needs. So at a minimum level as a BizOps, we can offer what we call transactional accounting support. So that can be any of these things: processing payroll, paying invoices, making sure invoices are properly approved and coded, sending out invoices to your customers, or even to, if you have grants, to your funders, bank reconciliation, credit card reconciliations, anything needed to, on a transactional level, to get your financial statements to where you would like them. The next step up from that is financial compliance and reporting. So this would be getting more involved with your month-end close processes. So maybe in addition to transactional reporting, we have someone from CLA then review to make sure those transactions were done properly, to make sure bank reconciliations were done properly. From this, we can then prepare financial statements. And again, depending on our clients, some we prepare monthly, some quarterly, some annually, some we do kind of on an ad hoc basis based on what the client's needs are at that time. And then from there, since we're that involved in the month-end close process, we can assist with any audits or 990s that need to be prepared. Also, what could fall into this category is any grant reporting. So whether it's to the state, to the federal, or to a private funder, we can help with that kind of reporting and to make sure your organization is in compliance. We can take another step further and look at strategic financial analysis and forecasting. So this would include budgeting, presenting financials to your governance board or management team, whatever you prefer, working on cash flow projections, also working with your partner contracts, so such as working on budgeting for any grants you may have, and also kind of helping strategize using your funds in the best way possible. So and again, this is something CLA we can offer each one of those, or we can build on these as you need them. But then we can take it further and we can help with automation of processes. So if you're right now doing everything in Excel, we can help you get into an accounting software that makes things a little bit easier. If right now bills are being approved and paid manually, we can automate that process so it's a little bit more efficient. We can also help automate the payroll process. So that's another option. And a lot of times, once we get involved with month-end close, if we do get involved, we will have suggestions on how to automate the processes so it requires less time to produce financial statements. And then from there, and again, this is all things that can be offered by CLA. It doesn't mean if you engage CLA, you have to take include these services, but just to give you an idea how far CLA can help you in your organization, we can provide human resources services. So things such as, policy and procedure manuals for your employees. Again, setting up payroll, making sure everything is correct in the payroll system. We can also help with talent recruitment. So if you're searching for certain positions to fill in your organization and you're not having a lot of luck on your own, we can help with that. We can also help with tax compliance, especially with the 990. So this is like the wide range of services we can provide. Now, saying all that, sometimes we do have clients who they may have some questions here and there, but they don't necessarily have work they want CLA to do on a regular basis, and that's fine. Under that, we can set up a consulting agreement where you can reach out to us whenever you have a question or want us to review something. And even if those questions fall within one of these categories, that's fine. And that's more of a consulting agreement where you have us on standby if you have any questions or anything you want to run by CLA to make sure you're doing it correctly. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. So
Hi.
Oh,
I have a
yeah,
question. Would that
yeah.
consulting agreement be on an hourly basis, for example?
Yes, and I was actually going to get to the next slide is on fees, which I know you guys probably all want to know. So if you still have questions, Susan, let me know after this slide. So most of the consulting would be on an hourly basis. Most of our engagements would be an hourly basis. However, we do have some monthly fixed fee arrangements, and that's normally when at minimum we expect the fixed fee to be $1,000 per month, and you're using CLA in lieu of hiring an internal hire. Now, some of the advantages of charging an hourly rate is you guys can use us as much or as little as you want to, and that gives you a little bit more flexibility, especially if you're considering hiring someone to work for you, or even if at part-time. With CLA, if it's an hourly engagement, we're not going to make you have a minimum of hours you have to engage us each month, for example. Some other things to think about too, whether to engage someone like CLA versus an internal hire, is you can avoid the cost of benefits and employment taxes. With CLA, you just pay us our hourly rate. And CLA, we understand, especially with non-for-profits, budgets and how money's spent really matter. So we do leverage technology to reduce the time, and that's where some of that automation of process may come in. And we also look at what the client needs and assign staff to that engagement so that the work is still getting done, but it's at the lowest rate possible. And as you can see, here's our hourly rate per title. And the title is driven by what type of work you would require from CLA. So some of that transactional accounting I talked about, that would be done by a staff accountant. So it'd be at a lower rate, but that's just doing, bank reconciliations, not necessarily reviewing them though. That would be more of an assistant controller level. CFO level would be more the financial analysis and budgeting and working with your partners on your contracts and grants to maximize the service to you. As I said, there can be a fixed rate pricing available. Again, though, we look at that as $1,000 minimum per month. And again, you're hiring CLA instead of hiring an internal hire for your accounting needs. Does that answer your question, Susan? Okay. So that's what we do, just the biz ops kind of in a nutshell. just looking at CLA overall, like I said, it's a nationwide firm located in 120 locations. So again, compared to some of the other local firms, we have a wide source of resources we can use. Even if we don't know in our internal office the answer to your question or what you may need. There's just some more stats on the type of clients and activities CLA is involved in. Let's move to the next one. And so again, outsourcing is what BizOps, what I do, falls under, but we also do consulting, like I mentioned. There's the human resources, there's even tax and audits. And so, and I do have some clients that they come to us just to help with monthly financials, and then they start asking more questions that might fall under our wealth advisory services. So in some ways, I think they know once they come to CLA, they can ask us, like, hey, is this something else CLA could do or have some input into, rather than shopping on their own with different vendors. And then again, this is just some other things we can do a little bit more detailed in that second slide. I thought at this point too, I would talk about how different some of our clients are as far as the type of services they get from CLA. For instance, I have a client who unfortunately due to COVID had to downsize. So their board of directors are the ones kind of doing what used to be the executive director's work. At the time, CLA had a fixed fee agreement with them to do, all their month and close processes, payroll, etc. Well, now they don't need those services at the time until they COVID the restrictions with COVID makes it easier for them to fulfill their mission. So we went with that. That is an hourly consulting rate, and I can go a month without hearing from that client, and then I could hear from them a few times a month. And again, because we're under a consulting agreement, we can provide any services they request. And sometimes when they reach out to me, it's just a simple question. Other times it's doing a cash flow projection for them, because that's what they're really focused on right now in this environment with COVID. So that's kind of one client where we're always on, I would say, on call for that client. And it can vary when I hear how often I hear from them, as well as what type of needs they have. On the flip side, I'm involved in a client where CLA is considered part of their accounting team. And that team has an accounting manager and 2 accounting staff that reports to this client. And then CLA is like the next layer of accounting supervision. And this client, CLA is very involved with what's going on day to day in the operations, the budgeting, some HR things. Let's see, just with the management, like CLA is very known in that organization, and almost at times can feel like CLA is part of that organization, rather than just an outside vendor coming in and doing some work here and there for that organization. So like I said, we can help get your books in order, whatever that looks to you. Again, we've talked to some non-for-profits who aren't quite ready for an accounting software yet, but again, they may consider having us as a consultant, so we could kind of help them along the way. And if they get to that point, they're ready for a full-fledged accounting software, we're familiar enough with their business and their needs to help guide them in making that decision and how best to implement that decision. And then from there, depending on the needs, we can look at making sure there's timely monthly or quarterly financials, whatever's the need of the organization, as well as trend analysis, dashboards, budgeting, etc. And then we can look at, if we can even take it farther, to look at where could you maybe expand? What's the best way to maximize the resources you do have, or even, I know in the case with non-for-profits relying on grants, what are some other grants to consider to help supplement what you're already doing or that fits the mission of your organization? So again, this just shows the different layers of assistance we can provide depending on the needs of your organization. So that's all I had officially prepared, but if anybody has any questions, whether it's something about what CLA can offer, how it may work, or any just general maybe questions about accounting or, concern, something you might wonder you need to do for your organization.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we have been initially concerned with is when we get a donation, being able to create a receipt for that particular organization. And right now we don't have any software for that. Is there any suggestion in process or procedure that we should be following?
Yeah, I would say even if you don't have an accounting software, as long as you're tracking you receive that donation and who it's from, and you send out some kind of receipt to that organization, that's fine. I think the key is just making sure it's tracked, whether it's in Excel or Word or how you prefer to track things.
So,
And yeah.
Haley, let me try to ask. I think some of the questions we've got over time are about really early stage issues, like you talked about credit card reconciliation, proper handling of invoices, this question about receipts for donations. How do our members think about even what they need to ask in those early stages?
That's a good question. I would say, and I'm sure you guys provide some background where they have a sense of, oh, that's something I need to think about. But I would definitely say starting off, like the donation question, at this point, if you're small enough to not need an accounting software, I think that it's more make sure you track it. By the time you get into an accounting software is when doing it in Excel or Word is too cumbersome, and accounting software will help. So I think it's no matter how small your organization is or where you're at in the startup process, is making sure everything you're doing is clearly tracked, and like credit card reconciliations. I know it's really easy to use a card and thinking, oh, I'll get those expenses coded later on, and then you try to do it 6 months from now and you've completely forgotten where you spent it, and it doesn't mean you spent it incorrectly, it's just harder to know how to code those expenses. So I think setting some of those good best practices of making sure everything's clearly tracked no matter how you decide to do it, and doing it on a timely basis are the things to keep in mind as you start up. Because at some point, if you get big enough where you need to start reporting to a board monthly, at least you're already in that practice of consistently keeping track of things as they occur, rather than waiting until you absolutely have to provide that information to somebody else.
Thank you, Haley, for that overview. I was wondering if you can touch on if there are any kind of common threads or frequently asked questions that come up among your nonprofit clients that would be helpful for us to know.
Yeah, I would say it's just making sure you have the right registration with the state of Illinois. At what point do you need to file a 990? So again, I would say for anyone who hasn't done that type of stuff, that's something either CLA could help us with, or this is a heads up you need to need to know whether that applies to you or not. I think other questions we get relates to just similar to Mark's question, like the process. And again, there are some people who use accounting software, but just because they use an accounting software doesn't mean they use it like they should. So just using an accounting software isn't a guarantee that you're keeping track of things like you should. So I think it's really understanding what you need to do and why you're doing it versus just, oh, okay, I have an accounting software now. It's going to do everything I need it to do, when there's some work for the end user to do to get it in the accounting software how it should be.
Thank
You have a question in the chat. Look.
Okay, I'm reading it right now. So when asked to provide a nonprofit's budget, is that a fixed document that is approved by the non-for-profit at the start of its fiscal year, or can an updated budget be provided? It seems the budget for a non-for-profit changes over time. That's a good question. So Susan, I would say, well, I'll say, like, here's the advantage of having a fixed budget that you approve at the beginning of the fiscal year. It's a way to hold the organization accountable for the plans you made, knowing what you knew at the time of that fixed budget. However, as we all know, especially with budgeting, as soon as you make a budget, the next day you learn something and it changes what, if you would have known that, your budget would have changed. So I think it's balancing. For instance, let's say you get a grant in that you didn't have budgeted, you were going to receive that money. Then I would say that would warrant a budget revision so that you can show, okay, this is the expenses we're going to spend under this new grant award that we didn't have in our approved budget at the beginning of the fiscal year. However, you want to avoid changing the budget to kind of fit how things are going if it's not holding you accountable to the goals of the budget that was initially approved. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Haley was kind enough to provide her email and phone number. Please don't hesitate to reach out to her. And then Haley, you'll be providing the slides that I can send out to everybody. You're forwarding those.
Yep.
Great.
I'll send those to you.
Perfect. Yep. Right. If there's no other questions, we'll stop the recording and.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.